Okay, so we're ready to begin. Good morning, my name is Sally Morris-Pritchard, Committee Services Officer for Conway Council. I've conducted a sound check before the start of the meeting, so I assume that everyone can hear me. Can I welcome everyone to today's meeting, where we're all attending remotely. In addition to committee members, we also have non-committee members, cabinet members and officers joining to assist with the discussion. For those viewing the live stream or recording, committee members are identified with an asterisk next to their name. The meeting will be recorded and live streamed and will be available for viewing after the meeting. Should the live stream fail, the meeting will continue and a recording will be available through the Council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. Can I remind members that translation facilities are available and to choose your language of choice. If you wish to speak, please use the raise hand function. You can also use the chat facility, but please note that the chair may not be able to monitor the chat facility during the meeting. All microphones will be muted, and if you've indicated your intention to speak, you'll be invited to turn your microphone on. If you leave your device for any reason, can you please ensure you're muted and that you turn your video off? So before we move on to the agenda, we need to appoint a chair for this meeting only. Do we have any nominations, please? No, so I have sent you an email beforehand advising of who is able to be chair of this meeting. Does anybody want to make any nominations or put themselves forward?
Can I suggest Councillor Andrew Wood?
Councillor Andrew's not able to be chair, no, unfortunately.
Oh, I've got to start by his name, sorry.
Sally, shall I just come in here? Members, you were sent an email on Friday reminding you of the situation. The only members of the Governance and Audit Committee that are able to take up the chair's position, and I'll read them out to you, is Phil Brooks, Councillor Garfield Lewis, Councillor Tristan Lewis, Councillor Sue Lloyd-Williams, who I think we've had apologies from, Councillor Don Milne and Ian White. So if someone could please nominate one of those members to take the chair for this meeting only. Thank you.
Councillor Chris Cater has his hand raised.
Yes, could I ask Councillor Tristan Lewis if he'd be willing to chair the meeting today? I'd like to propose him.
Yeah, do we have a seconder?
I'll second that, thank you.
Seconder, yeah, do we have any other nominations? No other nominations. Okay, all in favour, could you raise your hand? Yeah, okay, so Councillor Tristan Lewis has been appointed chair for this meeting. So I'll hand over to Councillor Tristan.
Diolch yn fawr. This was quite unexpected, but I shall do my best. Please shout at me if you want to speak. Na I gadw golwg o ran codi llaw.
And by the translator. And if you need anything, then please just let me know. So the first item of the agenda is apologies for absence.
Yeah, apologies have been received from councillors Penny Andow, James Lusted, Stu Lloyd-Williams and Pauline Heap-Williams.
Diolch yn fawr iawn.
So the next matter is the declaration of interest.
With the Code of Local Government Conduct. Os rywun yn fan hyn, I'm not.
Anyone wish to declare an interest?
Is there anybody with declarations of interest? Na, pawb yn hapus.
No, okay. Everybody happy? Okay. So item number 3, urgent matters. Anyone got anything to raise?
No, not aware of any urgent matters, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Rhif 4 ydy...
Thank you very much. Item number 4 is the minutes of the previous meetings. There are 2 previous meetings. So the 16th of November and the 29th of November. We'll take the 4 days of the 16th of November first.
Councillor Wood? Yep.
Right, sorry, can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, I can.
Right. Just a very quick one. Previously on the minutes, it was we talked about electric vehicles at £2.3 million. I'm sure the answer came that the whole cost would be, well, met by Welsh Government, but it says on the minutes that most of the cost would be. If somebody can clarify that somewhere on the line, I'd be grateful. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I clarify that, Councillor Wood? Sandra.
Thanks, Sandra.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's actually 50% will be met by Welsh Government.
That's not most of the cost, then, is it?
Yeah. That was
Not
that was
all of the cost.
Yeah. 50%.
So we've paid 1.2 million for how many electric vehicles?
I think it's 6.
6, is it?
6.
Okay. Just a bit of disinformation. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Sandra. Thank you.
Yep. Are you happy, Councillor Wood?
No, very unhappy because
No, not happy. But
I am happy, Councillor Lewis.
Yeah.
But
Right.
To be told that that Welsh Government were financing electric vehicles, and then told that most of the cost was financed by Welsh Government, and now to be told only half the cost needs an answer. So somebody's made a decision on that to spend £1.2 million of your money, our money, when we're strapped on electric vehicles, which I believe aren't working so well. So there needs to be an answer on that. You know, it is in the minutes, but obviously that needs to be clarified, doesn't it? And maybe brought forward somewhere on the line. Thank you.
Yes. Can I come back to perhaps Sandra there? Where do we go from here, Sandra? Can we make sure that it's on the agenda, that it needs a discussion? Because, Councillor Wood has a very fair point here.
Yes, shall we bring it on to the next agenda?
Yep, we'd be grateful. Thank you very much.
Do you want to raise it under the forward work programme?
Yes.
This item is just for the accuracy of the minutes.
Yes, quite. Are you all happy with that?
Yep.
Smashing. With that in mind, gyda hynny, gai rwy'n I gynnig...
Want to propose that the minutes are correct. And can I ask somebody to second that as well, please?
Can I propose it? Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Cynghorydd Jeff Corey yn eilio.
And Councillor Jeff Corey, second that. And are we all in favour of that decision?
You can show your hands. Yep. Don, in favour? Yep, okay, good. 4B, 4B.
Can we all go on to 4B, which is the minutes of the 29th of November? So again, can I ask for a proposer and a seconder, please? So Councillor Chris proposing, and can I ask somebody to second that position, please? Councillor Smith, thank you very much. Can I have a show of hands for that position, please? Thank you. So we'll go on to item number 5. So to review the governance
work programme. Pwy sgennau yn cymryd hwn? Keith?
So taking this item, please. Is it Keith?
Bain o'r swyddogion sydd yn mynd...
Which officer is taking this? So nobody usually presents this item. Is there anything to be raised from this item? No, everybody happy? So Councillor Michael Smith.
Yeah, other than what was just previously discussed, bringing the electric vehicles that Andrew's asked to be added to it.
Yep, I think that's
good.
Yep, that's already happening. So Sandra says, yep, happy with that. Okay, pawb yn hapus?
So everybody happy?
Have a proposer and a seconder just to confirm that.
Dyna ni, Cynghorydd Don yn cynnig.
Councillor Don, proposer, and seconder, Councillor John Roberts. All in favour of that decision?
Yep.
Great, thank you very much.
Right. Item 6.
So item number 6.
6A and 6B. Consider reports by the Strategic Director, Finance and Resources on the following matters. capital strategy and treasury management. We'll take 6A first.
Okay, I'm going to take that report, and I have a presentation if I can share my screen. Okay, so this is a Treasury Management report then for the start of the year. So just as a reminder to members then, so they recommend that these reports are taken to the Audit and Governance Committee so that they can scrutinise them more so than if they're presented to full council. So the report format then, it covers the appendices and the main report. So it's the capital strategy, the treasury management strategy, Prudential Indicators and the investment strategy. So hopefully going through a presentation will give you further understanding of the report, because I understand it is quite complex. So these treasury management reports then, so we present to you one at the start of the year. So that's the strategy for the year. We do an interim monitoring report in September, and then we do a final one at the end of the year, which kind of informs you of what's happened during the year and where we are with regards to treasury management. So our capital strategy then, so what's the purpose of the strategy then? So it's kind of to give you a link to our capital expenditure, how that fits in with treasury management, sets out the governance of the whole treasury management strategy. It explains what the minimum revenue provision is. It explains what asset management is and asset disposal. So this is all in the Appendix A. It details liabilities and our commercial activity. And it also sets out the implications for the revenue budget, the knowledge and the skills of the staff that undertake treasury management on behalf of the council. And it just provides an overall summary of the treasury management strategy for the year then. So it's to provide assurance to members that officers are acting appropriately and not undertaking risk, basically, specifically in the following areas. So SITFA were keen that when we set a strategy then that we're in English councils, they were undertaking a lot of commercial activity, so investing outside of the council's main work, basically, to try and make additional money for the revenue budgets. So for us as a council then, we don't invest in any commercial property. We only do the core business then. And to make sure that members are aware of any liabilities the council have. So the only one that we need to inform you of is the Conway, which is the insurance provision from the previous authorities, which is from before 1996, and we're still getting claims on that one. So that's our liability. The capital financing costs, so specifically what is the percentage of the revenue budget? So for 22-23 then, our capital financing costs, so this is the repayment of the debt, and the interest cost is 6.2% of your overall revenue budget, which is 15.833 million. And to provide you assurance that the knowledge and the skills of the staff that are undertaking treasury management on your behalf then are sufficiently trained and they have sufficient support available, because we are dealing with large sums of money. So Prudential Indicators, so the first indicator then is the authority's capital expenditure plans then. So that's on page 28, table 1. So for 22-23 then, we are talking of a capital programme of 86.052 million. So this includes 32.561 million of new schemes, which is still going through the approval process. But that's what we're estimating it to be. And then in the Q3 capital report, we are suggesting that 53.491 million will roll over from previously approved capital programme. The capital financing requirement, so this is our underlying need to borrow. So basically this is your mortgage. So this is, of all the capital spend, is what we still need to pay back then, basically. So that's on table 4, page 30. So the net CFR, so this is the amount that we've borrowed to spend on the capital programme without our PFI leases then, so this is all our capital expenditure that we haven't paid back, then we're estimating is going to be 231 million. So that's how much we need to repay over a number of years. So because we've got quite a large capital programme, we're estimating that's going to increase by 44 million. On page 31, table 5, it shows that we're actually under borrowed to our CFR. Then we're actually 20 million under borrowed against the CFR. That's because we're using some of our reserves to support the capital programme rather than going out to borrow. The authorised limit then, so I need to report this to you because it's the statutory limit for our borrowing. So we've put that authorised limit at 264 million. So we put a bit of headroom above the CFR just in case we need to go out in an emergency and borrow extra funds. The operational boundary then is basically just the CFR with a little bit of working cash flow, so the RSG and salaries. The next indicator then is the affordability. So it's the actual and the estimates of the ratio to the net revenue stream. So from 2021, it decreases from 6.8% to 6.2% of your revenue budget. And I think that's because you have an increase in net revenue budget. So the actual budget then for MRP and VRP is 6.2 million. Included then is also our lease repayment. So this is for your Coed Petler, which is 1 million. So interest is 8.6 million, which gives us a total capital financing cost of 15.8 million against your net revenue budget of 255 million. So the strategy then, so on page 36 then, so our current debt, so the current debt at the moment is 178 million, which is made up of 65 million of short-term borrowing, 31 million of market loans or our LOBOs, and 82 million of PWLB. So this was a very similar to what we reported in February 21, only that the short-term borrowing at that time was 63 million. So for our temporary borrowing then, we're saving about 650,000 a year by using temporary borrowing and borrowing from other local authorities, because the difference between the temporary and a PWLB loan is about 1%. So there's an additional 1% for going to the PWLB. So there are still funds available out there on the market. It's lots of other local authorities are putting funds out there for us to go and borrow. So later on, I'll show you who we're actually borrowed money off. Interest rate movement then, so we need to report this then. So the latest forecast is there will be some movement in rates then. So as you may be aware, on the 3rd of February, the MPC moved the rates up to 0.5%. And there's still some uncertainty over economic recovery and inflation, and rates could move up further. But our Treasury management advisors have said that they don't think they will move up in the near future. Debt restructuring, so because there's such a big difference, there's a 1% cost of debt restructuring. It's just not feasible to restructure any of our PWLB currently. So this is where we have our short-term borrowing at the moment. So this is on the 11th of February, we had 67 million. So these were taken out before the interest rate moved up to 0.5%. So if you can see, like some of these low rates, we've got 11 million from the London Borough of Islington at 0.06%. So they see other local authorities as a safe place for them to put their money with rather than going into the banks. So the money is there for us to borrow on a short-term basis. So there is liquidity in the market for us to go out to borrow. Bank call accounts then, so they're offering 0%. And so other local authorities see us as a low risk option, and they're getting some return on the money. Rates have increased slightly. We're estimating that they could move up to 1% on short-term borrowing. And we have done some modelling. So based on the large capital programme we have, with rates moving up to 1%, then the interest budget is 6.415 million. If we do spend all our capital programme and borrow up to the limit, then we could see a little bit of an overspend on our interest budget. We've modelled that at about 105,000, but this risk will be monitored. But as members know, we have a capital programme, but we don't usually achieve the programme that's set out there. And then we have the Welsh Government, and they come and offer grants. So some of that spend is then covered by grants, so we're not going out to borrow. But we will monitor the position going forward with regards to the interest rates. So this was the latest interest rate forecast from Arlene Close, then our Treasury advisors. So you can see that they estimated an increase in the rates up to 0.5% in March, and then they've estimated that they would stay more or less the same. But this was back in January. How they will move, we don't know. This is the current PWLB rates. So where we are estimating that short-term borrowing is going to go to 1% then. So 1 year PWLB money then is over 2%. If you take it out longer, we're going up to 2.5% and even more. So there is a big difference from taking short-term borrowing and the PWLB borrowing. The economic outlook then obviously is the country's trade position post-Brexit, the impact of the coronavirus, inflation, and these influence on the Treasury and Management Strategy 2023. So our Treasury performance indicators and the maturity borrowing. So that's when our portfolio will mature. So we're estimating we've put a limit of 60% of our borrowing maturing within 12 months. And of that, it includes the 20 million of LOBOs. So these are our market loans. Because they can call them every 6 months, we have to include them in short-term borrowing. So our current limit is 48%. So we currently have 48% of our portfolio as short-term borrowing. So there is a risk in holding short-term borrowing if interest rates rise exponentially. Our investment strategy then, so obviously our first objective is the security of our money, the liquidity, getting our money out, and the yield is the lowest one. So we have money in call accounts. Currently we have 6.5 million in the call account, which is used for our cash flow on a daily basis. We've also got, because we've just had grant day, we've got quite of MO, so that's the debt management office. So this money will mature over the month so that we can pay our salaries and wages and suppliers, etc. So our other counterparties, so on our list then, the DMO, so that's the debt management office, is unlimited. So it's the most secure place for placing our money. Money market funds, we've left these on the list, but we haven't used them, but they can be used if market conditions change. So they could be used for cash flow purposes rather than bank accounts. Repos, we have not utilised repos, but they're still on the list. And also property funds are on the list, but there's no expectation that will be utilised at this time. So the Welsh Government issued guidance to local authorities for our investments to be applied from the 1st of April. And we have to differentiate between the type of investment. So the ones that we make for the council, for the Treasury, so our cash flow purposes and our borrowing, our commercial investments. So we don't actually have any commercial investments, and it also sets out the criteria we should have for loans to organisations. So we do have loans to community organisations, and all these loans are approved by members, so they will all come to members for approval before we make any loans. So our risks for 22-23, making sure our investments are secure, so placing them in the DMO is the most secure place, the bank call accounts and other local authorities. So these are the more secure ones, especially the DMO or bank call accounts. They're very liquid. You can take the money out when we need to. And again, possibility of interest rate rises due to inflationary pressures. So on the 4th of February, when they increased the rates, the 4 members of the Monetary Policy Committee wanted to move interest rates up even beyond the 0.5 to 0.75%. So we have done a model of the impact on those increased interest rates. And that brings me to the end of the report. And these are the recommendations. I'll stop sharing, thank you, if you have any questions.
Smashing, many thanks, Sandra. Cynghorydd Michael Smith yn gynta.
Smith first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sandra, for the report. Last time you brought a report like this to us was a little while ago now, but there was a discussion around how we had got more interest payments since the Bank of England introduced an increase from the 0.10 to the 0.25. I think we were earning an extra £10,000 on our investment, if my memory serves me right. So since the increase from 0.25 to 0.50, have we seen an increase in our interest that we earn ever so slightly? Again?
Not much, because a lot of so when we invest with the DMO, so that's the debt management office, the rates are very, very low. So they're kind of 0.01 or even I've got an example. And then most of our other money is held in bank call accounts, and that's for cash flow purposes, and they're offering very, very low rates as well.
Okay.
So we're not relying on interest on our investments currently.
No,
it might be because the interest rates are moving up. We might get more interest on the investments.
Yeah. All right. There we go. Thank you anyway. Thanks for the report.
Diolch. Hapus, Cynghorydd Smith, Cynghorydd Wood.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. We had a pre-meeting beforehand. I think we need to bring it to members' attention that the budget that you've established for 23, 24, 24, 25 is a budget which is a lot less than the 21, 22 ones, and that there is a reason to maybe cap the capital strategy or business case funding. As we're going to talk about this as a capital strategy for 22, 23, we may need to explain this to members. So I don't know if Amanda can do that or Sandra wants to do that, please.
Yeah, I'll come in if I may. So effectively, obviously, this capital strategy is looking forward on the program and members have approved for 21-22. Obviously, the 22-23 capital programme is currently going through democracy, and obviously council will be approving that. For the purposes of this report, we have assumed that the proposed capital programme that FROSC and Cabinet considered last week is going to be included, and I appreciate that might change if a different decision is taken, but you know, in the context that we had to prepare the capital strategy and bring it to you today, obviously we had to make that assumption. And then in terms of 23, 4 and 4, 5, effectively at the moment we've just put an estimate in of about 12 million there, and the reason for that is And for those of you on FROSC, or if you've read the papers, I did note in the report on the capital programme that I think there is a need perhaps for us to start to move towards having a slightly more modest capital programme, because the revenue consequences of the programme to date are quite significant, and given the financial outlook for the revenue budget in 23, 4 and 4, 5, it was a recommendation really that potentially we had a slightly more modest capital programme, in order then that the impact on revenue wouldn't be so big. Obviously that's all decisions to be made in the future and decisions to be taken by members, but for the purposes of this report we just made that assumption. Thank you.
Yep. Hapus, Cynghorydd Wood?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that explanation is good. Yeah, thank you.
Diolch yn fawr.
Oedd
gennau Cynghorydd Chris...
Chris Cater with his hand raised, but
His hand's still up, yeah.
I'm not sure if he's still at Sorry, I can't see
Hello.
the hand raised at the moment. Councillor Chris.
Yeah, sorry, I've turned my camera off because my internet connection is very unstable. I don't know if others are having a problem this morning. But I always find Sandra, and I want to thank her for this, for being so reassuring, because as we know, there is a lot of uncertainty over the economic recovery with the pandemic still continuing in one shape or form. So, the fact that we can borrow extra funds in an emergency is good news, and that our affordability is improved is also good news. I think we're all worried about interest rates, and it was interesting in Sandra's presentation that short-term rates are still so low and there is a lot of liquidity in the market. Anyway, I think I'm happy to propose that we go with the recommendations in 2.1. That's the 3 recommendations there. I'd be happy to propose that, Cadeirydd.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Mae gennym ni gynigydd felly
So we've got a proposal, 3 recommendations. Councillor Wood, are you seconding that, or?
Yeah, I'll second that, but I do just one more query for Sandra, actually, while she's here. Is in 1996, this insurance thing that seems to have been going on for 26 years, when does this finish, the liability on the insurance?
It carries on basically because a lot of it relates to children, so it relates to the old Clwyd, the issues with the children homes there, so there is a liability, so the children don't need to make the claim until they're after 21, so we're still receiving claims at the moment.
Okay, but it's 26 years ago, isn't it?
I can come back. Yes, I'll come back with further information on that for you, Councillor Wood.
Yeah, sorry about that. It just seems to come up every year, and I just don't understand. Why 26 years later it's not been met. Okay, thank you.
Diolch. Ond yn hapus I eilio'r argymhelliad. Diolch, Cynghorydd Wood.
You're happy to second the decision, Councillor Wood? Yeah.
Diolch yn fawr. Felly, ydy pawb o blaen,
I will need to read the names out for this one because it's being recommended to council for approval. Yeah,
Fire
so
away.
it's 4 against or abstain. Councillor Carol Beard. Oh, sorry, could you say that again? Councillor Carol Beard. 4, thank you. Councillor, Philip Brooks.
4. Sorry.
Councillor Chris Cater. Councillor Chris Cater. No, I'm not sure Councillor Cater can hear me. I'll come back to him at the end. Councillor Jeff Corrie.
Yeah, I'm in favour. Sorry, I lost you then for a second.
Oh, thank you. I think a few people are having issues this morning. So Councillor Cater, Councillor Jeff Corrie.
4.
Councillor Samantha Cotton.
4.
Councillor Mary Doyle.
4.
Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams.
4.
Councillor Tristan Lewis.
Blaid.
Councillor Yvonne Lloyd. Not sure Councillor Yvonne's here. He has dropped out a few times. No, I don't think he is. Okay, Councillor Don Milne.
4.
Councillor Dave Rees.
For.
Councillor John Roberts.
For Blade.
Councillor Michael Smith.
For.
Ian White.
For.
And Councillor Andrew Wood.
For.
Yep, that's unanimous, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Diolch I chi gyd. Da ni'n symud.
Thank you very much. So we're now moving on to the anti-tax evasion policy. So that's number 6.2 on the agenda.
Okay.
Taking this, please.
I'll be taking that again, Councillor Tristan, thank you.
Diolch yn
I have
fawr.
a very quick report. I've got a very quick presentation which summarises the main points of the report. So if I just share my screen. Okay, so this is the anti-tax evasion policy. So this was approved by Cabinet last week. And this is brought to the Governance and Audit Committee so that you can consider the policy as part of your role then to obtain assurance over the governance management arrangements. So the background to this policy then is that the Criminal Finances Act 17 sets out how relevant bodies will be considered criminally liable if they fail to prevent those that act on their behalf from criminally facilitating tax evasion, and a local authority then is considered as a relevant body under this act. So what will happen then is that corporate charges can be brought if this criminal offence is committed, but there needs to be two things that take place. It needs to be that the taxpayer needs to evade the tax, and that an associated person deliberately takes action to facilitate the taxpayer's evasion. So that's where the council would come in, that if one of our employees facilitated the evasion of tax by a taxpayer. And the offence committed would be failure to prevent the facilitation of tax evasion. And to defend those charges then, the council needs to demonstrate that it's got reasonable preventative procedures in place, and having this policy then goes some way towards having procedures in place then. So the policy then sets out the procedures that we need to put in place, which are in line with the guidance issued by HMRC. And then the guiding principles by HMRC then are that we should undertake a risk assessment. We should have risk-based prevention procedures in place. There should be a top-level commitment to the policy. We should ensure that our staff have due diligence. We should communicate the policy to staff, including training, and we should monitor and review the policy and update it in line with changes to the legislation. So the risk, the areas where the council most at risk then, or we could be vulnerable then, are CIS. So that's the Construction Industry Scheme, direct payments through social services, grants, IR35. So this is where we employ self-employed people, and we have to ensure that the tax for these people is paid over correctly. PAYE, so for payroll, and VAT. So we do have procedures in place in all those. This policy also links in then with the whistleblowing policy that we have, the counter fraud strategy, and the anti-money laundering policy. Ensuring a top level commitment then is a buy-in by the senior management, so they foster culture of reporting any suspicions of tax evasion. Due diligence then, so ensuring that our staff take care when processing transactions, which is covered in by other policies, but also additional training is to increase staff awareness of this tax evasion policy. As part of the policy then, there is the policy which allows staff to report any suspicions, and again, monitor and review So updating the policy in line with legislative changes and reporting those changes to members and staff. So the policy is supplementary to the counter-fraud strategy and anti-money laundering policy. And Cabinet, as I said, approved the policy on the 8th of February. And that's the end of the presentation.
Diolch yn fawr, unwaith eto, Sandra. Os
Sandra. Anyone have any questions to Sandra about this policy?
Ian White.
So Ian White, thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question for Sandra. In the detail of the document that you shared with us, there are several examples given that relate to tax evasion. One is overstating requirements at needs assessment stage, that's section 2.2. There's also the misuse of grant funding in section 3.1. And in section 8.1, the retention by staff of cash received. And I wonder, can you just put my mind at rest as to why these examples actually directly relate to tax evasion?
I think, sorry, could you just, so the first one was, sorry, which section?
Section 2.2.
2.2.
Which is about overstatement of requirements at needs assessment stage. And I couldn't see how that was connected with tax evasion, and equally in the other two examples about the misuse of grant funding and cash received by staff actually being retained.
Okay, I can't actually. Can I reply to you separately on that one, because I can't find them within the policy at the moment then?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ian, happy with that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Unrhyw gwestiwn arall
Very
rwan?
much. Is there anyone else with any questions at all? No.
Felly, gawn ni dderbyn y polisi yma.
We accept this policy and we ask somebody to propose as we do accept the policy.
Gawn ni derbyn yr adroddiad yma.
Councillor Lloyd.
Ifar Lloyd, gai rhywun i eilio, os gwelwch yn dda.
Councillor Eva Lloyd, can I ask somebody to second it, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Dave. Dave Rees yn eilio. A pawb yn hapus.
Thank you, Dave Reed, second that. Can I ask for a show of hands, please?
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. So we now move on to 6.3.
Corporate Issues Register, pages 78 to 161. Sbio rwan pwy sydd yn cymryd hwn.
I just ask who will be taking please. Great, thank you, Fran.
Thank you, Councillor Tristan. Good morning, members. Yes, so I'm just going to give you an overview in terms of the Corporate Issues and Risk Register. Just to remind members in terms of the reason that we table this report here is for us to provide you with assurance of the governance process that we have gone through to review our key risks and issues. In terms of the scrutiny of this document, this is being tabled for Scrutiny Committee, Finance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, so it will be scrutinised on their meeting on the 21st, on Monday. Just to take you through the report pack quickly, in terms of our corporate issues, there are two new that have been identified in this round. And sorry, also just to point out in terms of our governance process that as part of this round of review of the risks and issues, we have also had our annual external review with Audit Wales to provide us with sort of a critical friend challenge. This isn't a statutory obligation. It's just something that Conway has always liked to do as good practice to make sure that we have a fresh pair of eyes helping us doing that horizon scanning to identify any risks and issues, and that's always really useful. So in terms of the corporate issues, there are two that we've identified this round. Just taking you to page 83 of the pack. The first is around recruitments and the fact that we are finding it increasingly difficult to recruit to certain positions. And this is also reflected in our corporate risk register, in that obviously when we can't recruit to key positions, particularly this is an issue in social care, that also has a consequential impact in terms of some of our risks that we're monitoring. We've also added another corporate issue in relation to the Welsh Government proposals to remove priority need and intentionality for homeless. All other corporate issues have been reviewed but remain the same. Moving on then to the risk register. Sorry, I'm just scrolling down in my pack. We seem to have not put the bookmarks in this time. The new risks are identified on page 95 of the pack, and there are a few this time. Several relating to housing, in terms of the housing support programme and rapid rehousing. And given that we know housing and presentation of homelessness is a significant risk area, and on that basis we have asked officers if they can go away and reflect on the number of risks we have in this area in order to consolidate them and look at them holistically. So that is in progress at the moment. An initial meeting has taken place with officers, and we'll bring an updated approach to you next time. There's also new risks in the pack in relation to procurements. Hopefully this won't stay on the risk register for long. This relates to the fact that there is quite significant change in terms of legislation this year, and therefore we need to make sure that we comply with that. And at the moment there are quite significant capacity issues within the procurement team, and as you can see in the management controls, a business case has been submitted for that. There's a new risk on page 98 which relates to you, but don't worry, it's more about the fact that, as you are all aware, there are new requirements in terms of governance and audit committee that come into force in relation to the Local Government and Elections Wales Act, and therefore we just need to make sure that comprehensive training is put in place as we move into the new administration to support the new committee in their role. And we've also added a new risk which is more about just making sure that we reflect and implement lessons learned that the last 2 years have taught us in relation to responding to a pandemic, and that as we hopefully emerge from this pandemic, we embed that good practice in our future processes. And then finally, a new risk which is already being addressed and will feature hopefully within our new corporate plan objectives, which relates to making sure that we've got sound processes in place in relation to a strategic vision for our assets. So they are the new risks this time. In terms of the existing risks on page 103, as always, Janice does a fantastic job of colour coding things so that you can see where things have altered. So any risk reference that's highlighted in blue is to help you identify where the risks have been amended. And I just want to point out here, where was I? Sorry, to do my notes. Yes, you will notice here that under CR 2.2, which is 114 of the pack, that we have reduced the assurance rating. So this is in relation to safeguarding. There's two safeguarding risks that we monitor, one specifically in terms of the specific responsibilities of social care, and another which is more generic about our training approach, so that all members of staff and members are aware that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. Just to highlight that assurance rating change, we had quite a bit of discussion about this, in that we don't think that the likelihood that the risk in terms of safeguarding has increased. However, going back to the previous issue that I highlighted, that given that recruitment is such a significant problem now, particularly in social care, there are capacity issues here, and therefore the assurance rating reflects that concern. Likewise, in relation to safeguarding the generic risk on page 126, that alteration is just around our monitoring of statutory mandatory safeguarding training. And again, to give you assurance, an updated review in relation to our monitoring and improvement for safeguarding training has been tabled to go back to scrutiny. I think that's going 7th of March. So that's all in hand, and there is a new action plan in place to improve our mandatory training statistics. Also, just to point out that there is one error in the risk register, which relates to page 126, which is a comment about the increase in the national living wage. That should read 6.6%, not 606%. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. So as I said, the reason we table this is to make sure that you have assurance in terms of that the risks and issues have been reviewed, and just to remind members that this happens every 6 months. It's as a process that we go through after the completion of the service performance reviews. It's been scrutinised by strategic directors, the leader and cabinet portfolio member for governance and performance. And as I said, this round, an additional check by having that challenge from Audit Wales as well. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Fran, am yr adroddiad yna ac am yr...
Thank you very much, Fran, for that report. The risk register is very detailed. Any questions about Sam Cotton, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report, Fran.
Okay, clinical wells.
Going back to page 98, around the Local Government Elections Act, the introduction of training, would that training be delivered? It may not even affect me, but I'm just interested. Would that training be delivered in person by, I don't know, you or somebody? Because the training that we had, or certainly the training that I had, was sitting down and reading lots of documents, which was quite heavy weather, really. So it would be helpful if there was in-person training around governance and audit. Thank you.
Cyn I Fran fynd ymlaen, mae yna rhyw sŵn yn y cefndir, dwi'n siŵr os...
Before Fran continues, there's some background noise. So Sam is a bit unclear. Can I just make sure that everybody otherwise have their microphones off? Thank you. Fran.
Yeah, I think I managed to hear what Councillor Sam was saying.
I'm terribly sorry, I forgot that somebody's on the phone in the background. Yeah, so on page 98, just around the training, it was will it be delivered in person, and not reading a whole bunch of documents about fraud and what have you, interesting as they were.
I'm going to hand over to Sioned, who will be leading on the training, but I guess it'll depend, Sioned, won't it, in terms of where we're at with restrictions.
Yes. Democratic Services have put together a programme of training which should be undertaken in person. And I'm also aware that the WLGA have put together electronic modules that can be undertaken online as well, which support the in-person training.
Diolch yn fawr. Cynghorydd Sam hapus?
Thank you very much. Is Councillor Sam happy? Thank you very much. So Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to what we talked about before, capital strategy 22-23 and the budgets going forwards, talked in a pre-meeting about this, but there is a corporate issue. There's a risk involving the resilience and practice of business case funding is growing to an unsustainable cost, and that it should be either capped or budgeted for. It's a risk into our financial resilience. So I'd like that adding in. I believe it can be added into that. Fran did mention that. So do we need to actually add it in and ask members to vote on that?
Fran?
Sorry.
Perhaps I can come in, Councillor Tristan, rather than Fran.
Yep.
If that's okay.
By all means.
A risk register, CR9, which is about.
Amanda, can I suggest you turn your camera off? The sound's pretty bad.
Just a bit unclear. Yeah, thanks.
There we are. So hopefully you can hear me a little bit better now. Yeah, there is already a risk on the risk register, CR9.3, which is about the risk of being unable to manage and or resource unfunded new responsibilities and growing demand on pay and all that kind of stuff. So perhaps what I would suggest is we could just expand the wording of that a little bit to more explicitly refer to demands through business cases, etc., just so that it's covered off as part of that risk, if that's okay.
Yeah, if you can do, as you know, it has a direct effect on our finances at the end of the year on capital strategy. So, yeah, and in relation to financial resilience. So, if you can do, expand on that, business cases, and maybe look at to see what we can do, capital budget for in relation to that service that was asking. Thank you.
Thank you. So, expanding on CR 9.3, yeah? Councillor Wood, hapus, diolch yn fawr. Cynghorydd Don.
So Councillor Don, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one here. Page 88, we've got the review of existing ALN resource provision in mainstream settings. In the light of the change of funding from central to devolved budgets, I wondered whether there is some kind of financial risk here. It certainly has been expressed at other scrutiny committees in recent times. And I just wondered whether that area, not just looking at Scarborough Conway as reported here, but whether in fact we should be considering something along the lines of the financial concerns of how this devolution of the budget will actually work out in practice, and clearly needs to be monitored.
Diolch, Cynghorydd Milne.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. Can I ask who can answer that question, please? Amanda again? Or is it Fran?
Perhaps I can just say something in relation to the financial aspects. Yeah, I think that's a fair point that clearly it needs to be monitored, the risk. What I would observe though is there are, through the revenue budget this year, there are a number of business cases that have come forward in relation to the ALN funding. So I'm assuming some of that funding is effectively to address some of the concerns around this area. But I don't know whether, Fran, you can more explicitly refer to some of the detail about the education pressures.
Fran,
sorry, I'm really struggling to hear everyone at the moment, but I was going to.
Sorry, Fran, dwi'n meddwl bod ni wedi colli.
We lost you at the moment. Can we come back to this? I'm not sure the rain is affecting things at the moment. So we come back to this, or can Fran send you a response directly? Are you happy with that?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello.
I don't-
Sorry.
We're having a problem at the minute, Fran. Would you be happy if Fran answered you directly, or would you want a further discussion within the audit committee on that particular point?
Yeah, I think the point is that the reference made to actual other appeals for funding are from the centre, and that this is the concern that this is funding that has been passed over and is now being or will be handled by the individual schools. And clearly there is less flexibility given the likely sort of in-year changes that might take place that could create some problems across the sector. So yeah, I mean, I think possibly if Frank could sort of look into that area and respond to us all in writing if necessary.
Diolch yn fawr am y sylw ne. Wrach allan ni ddod â hwnna ymlaen.
For that, perhaps we can bring that to the next meeting. So that we can include that next time. Is everybody happy with that?
Yeah, great.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. So Ian, Ian White, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Fran. I've 2 or 3 questions, if you don't mind. A general one, first of all, is there any reason why a very large, well, quite a large number of the end dates noted in the detailed write-ups are all the end of March of this year?
Yes, this was to allow officers to have the time to update their particular controls in light of the fact that some of them had gone over their original end dates because of COVID.
Right. Oh, okay. So I assume the next time we see this report, that there will be sort of accurate and realistic end dates.
I think for most, yes. I am aware that certainly where we've just identified there are still pressures, particularly in social care, that we are trying to give realistic end dates, but obviously being aware that there may still be a need for slippage if there is a service under particular pressure. So we're just trying to keep it practical in terms of what those end dates might be. I should think most services will be able to give more timely end dates now, but as I said, in terms of particular pressured areas such as social care, we still might need to be flexible.
Okay, thank you. And I have a very specific date query. It's on page 142 regarding climate change, where the end date is noted as the end of March 2030. I took it that was actually not correct, since the actions were noted as around the review of work practices and procurement processes.
The end date there refers to the Welsh Government's overall target completion date for local government to have achieved our net zero carbon targets. So this has been pulled in from the overall Climate Challenge Programme Board. So all our dates are working towards that 31st of March 2030. That's the core dates. But in terms of the specific action, you're right. We aren't expecting the officer to have done that before 2030. So I think it's just been a slight miscommunication there in terms of the end date for that particular action to review the procurement process and the end date of the overall goal to be net carbon zero.
Good. Thanks, Fran. given the importance of reviewing work practices and procurement processes, should there not be more, can I describe them as realistic dates put against those actions rather than the 2030, which is a very general sort of date?
Yes, absolutely. And just to give you assurance, Ian, there is a whole programme board in place for this particular goal, which is the Climate Challenge Programme Board. So there is a considerable amount of detail and specific actions and specific end dates that sit within the overall programme documentation, as opposed to this high level response, which is just making sure we're monitoring it in terms of the corporate risk. So yeah, I will get the programme manager to alter that specific date, but there's a huge amount of detail behind this risk.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yes, yeah. And if you don't mind, just one final question, and it's around risk 5.5. It's on page 105, which is the ambitions of economic growth strategy and the local development plan, where there's a proposal to move that to the service risk as apparently something is no longer in the revised growth strategy. I'm not sure whether that narrative's entirely clear, certainly not entirely clear to me. But on the progress report and the detailed write-up, it talks about splitting the risk into market failure and lack of funding. I'm simply questioning whether these are actually risks. Are they not issues as they appear, according to the write-up, to be the cause of the failure to deliver the ambitions? Of the ambitions of the growth strategy and local development plan?
The risk here is that, and why it's been moved back to the service risk register, is that as part of the reflection on the pandemic, there was a task to completely review the economic growth strategy, and that has taken place. Therefore, there has been some alteration to the specific actions, and as I understand it, that's why it's no longer a concern, because the specific action around sites and market failure for sites to come forward is no longer a criteria within the revised economic strategy. That's my understanding. But what I will do, Ian, is go back to the service just to make sure that I'm clear in that response. I want to make sure I've got it right for you.
Fine. Okay. Fran. Thank you. It's just, if I can just make the point, I don't have a problem if they're moving that to the service risk register. That's not a problem for me as such. But I'm simply questioning whether market failure and lack of funding is actually a risk as opposed to an issue now that needs to be managed. But
I'll get an explanation for you. As I said, my understanding is that it's because they've reviewed the overall strategy and focus in light of COVID, as we know, the whole, significant change in business models.
Okay, thank you.
Ian, happy? Yeah?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Dwi cael neges gen Ifor Lloyd, mae o'n cael problemau.
He's having connection issues. I think there are many problems this morning with the connections, etc. So we can move on. So can I ask somebody to propose this risk assessment? And somebody says that as well, please.
John Robertson Cynnig.
Councillor John proposing. Thank you. And who's going to second that, please?
I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davies. So can we have a show of hands, please?
Sorry, it's another roll call because it's going to cabinet. It's been recommended to cabinet. Yep. So again, it's 4 against or abstain. So Councillor Carol Beard.
4.
Councillor Phil Brooks.
4.
Councillor Chris Cater.
4.
Councillor Samantha Cotton.
4.
Councillor Mary Doyle.
4.
Councillor Pauline Heap-Williams.
4.
Councillor Tristan Lewis.
Obliged.
Councillor Don Milne.
4.
Councillor Dave Rees.
4.
Councillor John Roberts.
Obliged.
Councillor Michael Smith.
4, sorry.
Ian White.
4.
And Andrew Wood.
4.
Yeah, that's unanimous, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, everybody. We will now move on.
To consider a report by the temporary Recruitments and Human Resources on the following matter. External regulatory reports. Dach chi'n gweld nhw fan ar dudalennau.
You can see that on pages 162 to 277. And I believe Fran is taking this.
Yeah, this is Fran again.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr, Fran.
Thank you. Hopefully you can hear me a bit better now. I've just altered my connection because that was quite challenging in the last report. Okay, so if I can take members to page 163, what I'm going to do is just run through very briefly what each of the reports are, and to notify members that in terms of questions, I'm very grateful that colleagues are here today who can answer the questions. Specifically, Mark Bowler hopefully will be able to answer any queries in relation to the various social services reports. So the first external regulatory report is Leave No One Behind. This is actually not specifically a regulatory report, but has been published by the Older People's Commissioner for Wales. And it's as the result of various engagement sessions that were held with older people in terms of the challenges that they have experienced, particularly during lockdown. And again, to give assurance to Governance and Audit Committee, an action plan has been developed and is within the pack. The next report relates to, and that was a national report. So as is practice within Conway, we always look at the national reports and ask ourselves, where does that reflect in terms of Conway, and what do we need to do as a result? The next report is the Social Services Budgetary and Cost Pressures report that was done in August 2020. The question there was, specifically for Conway, does the council demonstrate consistent and robust arrangements through partnership working in the commissioning and funding of residential care and nursing home accommodation for Conway adult citizens? The report was published in August 2020, and the conclusion was that the council has been unable to maximise the potential benefits of partnership working when commissioning and administering residential and nursing home care placements. And you can see there specific bullet points in relation to that conclusion in terms of pooled budget arrangements, not providing value for money, the fact that we have a well-established arrangement for contracting, but that national changes to the financial assessment process have added additional financial costs, and that the council acts to ensure that service users are in appropriate placements, but access to continuing healthcare funding can result in delays and disputes. We should point out that these issues are not unique to Conway, and pose a risk and a challenge to many councils and health boards in Wales. And again, an action plan is within the pack. Moving on, we have a report which relates to all 6 North Wales councils and Betsy Cadwallader Health Board in relation to the commissioning of older people's care homes placements. The question that was posed when this work took place in January 21 was around our partners collaborating effectively to take account of demographic changes and other external pressures in strategic commissioning of residential and nursing home care. The conclusion there is that partners are working individually and collectively to provide care home placements, but this is made more difficult by complex national processes, resulting in a significant focus on costs, which causes division amongst partners and has the potential to impact adversely on service users and their families. So strengthening accountability and developing a regional strategy and delivery plan would have the potential to drive positive change. Again, there are recommendations for improvement, and in this case, a regional response has been developed and is included as an appendices. Moving on, we also have another national report on the commissioning of older people's care home placements. Again, a national piece of work that took place in December 21. The report is mainly, the recommendations, within the report are mainly aimed at Welsh Government, and therefore the report is noted in the appendices. And then finally, we have the annual audit of Conway's assessment of performance. This is a requirement. The Audit Wales review that we have discharged our duties under the local government measure. The local government measure for local authorities in relation to performance has now been repealed, and we will now be working to the Local Government and Elections Wales Act. So that's just by way of introduction, and as I said, officers are here to assist with more detailed queries that you may have in terms of the specific action plans. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, diolch am hynny. A fel y glwswch chi, mae Mark Bawr.
As you've heard, there are many businesses here to answer specific questions. So, does anybody have any specific questions to ask?
Yeah,
Councillor Underwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. A question on the report on page 217, Exhibit 3, funding. The contribution from Conway is consistently virtually the same. The Health Board jointed funding contributions are wildly different, from £0 to 11,000 to 205,000. I'd like an explanation of that, please. It comes down to, there's a few instances on that one, but there's another explanation I'd like, and that is on, just bear with me while I go for my notes. There's a report on about outstanding invoices not paid by the Health Board. I would like Audit to look into that further. And there is, well, if we could just answer that one first. There is another one where there was a change between 24,000 is what the original cap was for assessment, and it went to 50,000. And looking at the report, it seems to cost us 872,000. And that was a Welsh Government policy. So do we pick the tab up on that, or does Welsh Government pick the tab up on that? Because that doesn't seem a fair way of imposing something on us and asking us to pick the bill up. So they're the first 3 points. We can go from there to start with. I've got a few more to come in after that. Thank you.
Gwilym, hapus i ateb.
Gwilym, can you help with this? Thank you.
Yeah, it might be useful. I mean, obviously this report was written in August 2020, and it's a significant local report about arrangements in Conway, and nothing fundamental has changed in the last 18 months since we published the report, due to a combination of factors, of which COVID-19 is a very significant part of that, because it's not been an ideal last 18 months. So the officers do have an action plan in place. It's probably better if the officers answer where they are with these disputes with Betsy Cadwallader. I would imagine there's been some progress since then. But the fundamental problem is that, as we say in paragraph 4 of the report, for service users and their relatives, funding for residential and nursing home care can be complex and confusing. It still is. And while responsibilities for the funding of care costs by health boards, councils and service users are set out in statute with clear Welsh Government guidance, disputes between public bodies over the interpretation of the guidance can cause additional stress to service users and their relatives. I think that's the most important point. That's still the case. But in terms of the disputes that we outlined in August 2020, I'm sure the officers can come back to you and give you a more up-to-date position on that. In terms of the Welsh Government decisions to increase the capital limit to £50,000. So basically, if you're means tested for care home costs, the first £50,000 of any property you might have or savings is disregarded. And that was a big increase on the previous capital limit. What the Welsh Government did was they brought that in over a couple of years. It gradually increased to £50,000. And now in terms of the overall grant that Conway receives, there's a sum set aside for that. But does it cover all the additional costs of that? That's a very good question. And that's why we, in the report in August 2020, said there ought to be, on a regular basis, say at least once a year, a detailed report provided to members saying, well, what's the cost of the new capital limit to Conway, take into account the general Welsh Government funding for it, and is that cost increasing? I don't know. And what we recommended, there ought to be a range of performance information provided to members on at least once a year on what the costs to Conway actually are, and also the performance of the financial assessment. How quickly a financial assessment's being carried out, because not that I'm saying there is a delay, but if, say, for the sake of argument, it was taking months and months to do these financial assessments, and then service users and relatives were being presented with a big bill, that would be clearly not a good thing. I'm not saying that's the case at all in Conway, but the point is, you as elected members don't get that performance information, which we felt, and we stated in the report, we thought you ought to be getting that information. So perhaps if the officers can come in on the detailed question about the sort of disputes with Betsy Cadwallader, where they are now, I don't know.
If I can just add to that, what Will has just said, we're talking of £864,000, and that was just for the first half of 1920, which is a considerable, considering how much we're struggling all the time with money, that is a massive amount of money, which you know, it leaves a big gap. And also on what he's mentioned there on page 219 on section 30, it just says at the time then, elected members we spoke to are not aware of these additional costs. I wasn't aware of them. They must be there somewhere. It was raised at Cabinet on one time during 2018, but it's not come to scrutiny and we haven't got any performance information. So this is something that we need to take forward as a committee and ascertain that information. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr i'r ddau o chi. Fran?
Fran, where do we go with this, please?
I think Amanda's got her hand raised to respond.
Oh, okay. I can't see Amanda. Yeah, diolch Amanda.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just to pick up on a couple of the points there in response to Councillor Andrew. In terms, firstly, of the outstanding debt with Betsy Cadwallader, this is something that I am aware of, and I have recently been in correspondence with Betsy Cadwallader about our long-term outstanding debt, because it is quite significant in terms of financial value, and it does seem quite difficult to get to a resolution and get the health board to settle those debts. So I don't have a detailed response. I think there's quite a bit of work to do in relation to the individual debts to establish the position and to recover that money. But just to assure the committee that I have, basically taken that task up, as it were, and I'm now in discussions with the Director of Finance at Betsy in order to progress that matter. I would say, however, as well, or for useful information, it's an issue I think all local authorities in North Wales suffer, and I'm sure if you went across to any of the other local authorities, they also would have substantial long-term debts with Betsy. So it is something that needs to be resolved in a way that makes it significantly less painful for everybody going forward. So that's on that one. In terms of the cost of the capital limit, I don't know, if truth be told, to what extent that cost us. I think it's probably quite difficult to assess, because obviously there's no guarantee when a resident who is entitled to receive care through through social care, whether they have money or whether they don't have money, and therefore whether they become a private funded person or a public funded person. So I think inevitably it must have a financial consequence, because clearly if an individual can retain a higher level of their personal finances than they could before, then obviously there must be a consequence. But I don't think you can necessarily quantify that in any explicit way, because it does depend on the individual makeup of the clients coming through our door at any point in time. Having said that, I'm sure we could attempt to do some comparative information which would at least give the committee information about the level of funding that we receive through contributions from our clients and their personal contributions. And then equally in terms of the financial assessment information, I think the auditors have obviously raised a valid point there in terms of the recommendations, and I'll be working with Helen Hobson, who is the benefits manager and responsible for the financial assessment team, to look how we can take that recommendation forward. Thank you.
Just as a footnote on that, please, Chair, as it involves probably around about £1 million worth of outstanding invoices, I'd like to propose that this is brought back to audit as a outstanding, and we can look at this because it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And interestingly enough, if you go back to point 37 on page 221, there does seem to be contributions to the pool budget do not include funded nursing home elements, indicating that our council has made payments on behalf of the health board for this service. So there's a separate funding issue, which is totally separate and it doesn't quantify, but is shown in Exhibit 3, which I need somebody to please explain to me, because it shows three separate quarters on Exhibit, but I just don't understand the figures and where they come from. So if you can, Chair, get somebody to explain them to me, and then explain where the funded nursing home element that we've paid them for the health board, where that is shown, because that, again, is an outstanding amount due to us. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Amanda, can we have clarification, or can you point us to the right direction on this matter?
Maybe. In terms of the figures in Appendix 3, perhaps I could ask Gwilym to clarify those. Is that possible, Gwilym?
Yeah, I mean, this report was written back in published in August 2020, and those were the figures at that time. I feel fairly confident to say that they will undoubtedly be changed now. The system only began in Conway in April 2019, and if you look at the report, we do say that some of the figures are a little difficult to understand, or we had difficulty understanding them. So I would imagine that if you get a report back on where you are with the outstanding invoices and also about what the contributions have been over the last year, things might be a bit clearer. Clearly, the first payments seemed to be quite odd, shall we say, but it was a new system coming in, to be fair to Conway and the other councils that was contributing in. I think the way forward really for the elected members is to get an update on the position about how much you're paying into this pool fund. As I understand it, you're still paying in money in, and then it gets sent back to you on the same day. So it's a transfer of money around, which we concluded didn't provide value for money. As far as I'm aware, and I'm pretty aware on this point, that's still what's happening. The money goes in once a quarter to Denbighshire County Council. After a few hours, it's just sent back to you, which we concluded was not value for money by any stretch of the imagination. So I think what you probably need, because this report was written, remember, we published it in August 2020. It's been a difficult time for Conway and everybody else because of the pandemic. So an update would probably give you a clearer picture about how it's operating now.
Can I just ask? Sorry, just a quick one. Sorry, Amanda. Is somewhere in the report there is a mention of a review? Is the Welsh Audit Office doing a review, an addendum to this report?
In some senses, what happened after this first report is we produced the 2 other reports, and my colleague Jeremy Evans was one of the principal authors of those reports. Perhaps if Jeremy came in here and explained what's happened since in terms of the other 2 reports, the one covering the whole of North Wales, including all 6 councils and Betsy Cadwallader, and also the national report. So perhaps that would be an opportunity moment for Jeremy to come in and talk about those reports.
Iawn. Gawn ni felly gynnig
Sally puts this on the agenda for the next meeting. And Jeremy comes here to present the report. Sorry, Jeremy's in the meeting now. So, Jeremy, can you help with this, please?
What we've got really here is a suite of reports that all go together. So the initial work that we undertook in Conway and Denbighshire that you've just been talking about with Gwilym and Amanda now, was the precursor then to a broader piece of work that we did across the Regional Partnership Board, so all 6 councils and BCU. And it was while we were doing that work that we recognised, more clearly that not only were there some issues for yourselves to tackle in terms of the way in which you were, operating, and likewise with partners, but there were also some issues for Welsh Government to address as they were looking at policy reform on the back of the Rebalancing Care White Paper. So. As I say, the reports build on each other. The Conway specific report then, fed into and with additional field work into the care homes commissioning one, and what we say in that is that the lack of a sort of a regional strategy is making it complicated, but that the issues that we talk about in the Conway report specifically are still there in that on that national picture, and so affect all of the 6 councils and BCU. So you're carrying significant risk associated with market stability, workforce and pre-placement agreements, that the market shaping statement and the Healthier Wales initiatives aren't leading to a strategic approach for care home commissioning, and that the RPB is complex and doesn't have proper accountabilities, in order to feed back what they're doing to you as a partner body. But then we talk more about the national fee structures and how complex they are. And I mean, you've been talking a lot just now about CHC and getting some of your money back, which you've paid that health should have. And this really drives straight to the point that we raised that the system, whilst you're doing what you can to make sure that service user needs are met, that the huge amounts of money involved and the very complex model against which you need to operate, having a significant focus on cost, which then causes this division between yourselves as partners, and also impacts on service users and their experience, and the family's experience as well of their induction into care, which, let's face it, are these people's last step on their care journey. Not to put too fine a point on it, but it's their last step on the care journey, and for that to be an unfortunate one is really probably quite distressing for them and their families. So I think that, you know, that really pulls together and takes on the work that we undertook in the Conway specific work. So this revised regional report with fieldwork was undertaken between February and March 2021. You know, the draft reports came out in mid 2021, and the final report was published just before Christmas. You know, alongside that, then, as I've mentioned already, there was a Welsh Government one, and we asked Welsh Government to look at the complexity of funding models, to better describe what it expects from pooled budgets and pooled funds, because clearly paying money, you know, to Denbighshire and then just receiving it back a few hours later is, you know, what's the point? You know, I mean, would you give, you know, look to your left and hand that person, you know, a tenner and then wait 2 minutes and they look back to you and hand it back to you? What's the point? You know, so it's clearly not offering any, you know, and driving out any of the benefit that a pooled fund is supposed to achieve. And so the Welsh Government need to set out and describe what it expects pooled funds to deliver more clearly. And Welsh Government also needs to set, you know, store by, you know, and, you know, outline what it expects of scrutiny of a regional partnership board's activities and its decisions, and develop a set of measures against which, you know, those regional structures can be evaluated for value for money. So, you know, in that report, we gave you some recommendations. We gave Welsh Government some recommendations. Your ones were around the use of pre-placement agreements across the region. It's about a regional approach to, you know, a strategic approach to care home commissioning. But it was also to look at how, you know, you could work with partners to reduce the areas of tension and stress and the result in poor value for money and poor service user experience across North Wales as you try and work within this very complicated framework. You need to improve your accountability of the regional partnership board so that individual councils have more sight of what's going on, more sight of the decisions, and have an ability to challenge and comment on those. And also just sort of build on that, the final recommendation was about making sure that commissioning arrangements for care home placements ensure that councils and Betsy Cadwallader fulfil the statutory responsibilities under the Wellbeing of Future Generations and the Welsh Language Act. So it's quite a complex set of reports that all work together, but with the same aim of trying to improve the service user experience as they go through into residential care, but also to try and simplify and improve what is a complex system, and one that obviously is an area of vast spend for each council and the health board on an annual basis.
Diolch yn fawr, Jeremy. Dwi ddim yn gweld y cynghorydd Wood ar y sgrin. Ond beth bynnag, mae Amanda edrych i mewn I hyn.
Amanda, and this was be on the agenda next slide.
Amanda wedi gaddo edrych I mewn I hyn.
Amanda's looking into this, and it'll be on the agenda.
Were you making an official proposal?
Hello, is somebody talking to me? Because I can't hear properly. It's breaking in and out.
Yeah, can I just check, were you making a proposal that reports brought back in relation to the outstanding invoices?
Invoices, yes. And yeah, an update on the invoices. Yeah, basically, and what we're going to do about the pool budget, which is the way forwards in some ways. So I don't understand. So we need...
So happy, Andrew, for it to be on the question
so
I asked.
We'll need a seconder for that, Chair, and
yep, that's fine.
And we'll take a vote at the end.
If you can do, Chair, that would be great, because there's lots of outstanding, not only money to Conway, but it's just not gelling together. We need to drive this forwards and for the betterment of the residents. So yes, please, if you can, please, Chair. Yes.
Diolch yn fawr. Dwi'n gweld cynghorydd Sam Cotton.
Councillor Sam has seconded that. Thank you very much. Do you all so Sally, can
if I take the vote at
now?
If that's okay, yeah, okay.
Fine, okay. A wedyn nhw'n I glymio mewn efo'r adroddiad.
Take that possible 7.1. So, Councillor Don, you've been waiting patiently. Thank you.
Don, yep.
Hello. As already has been mentioned about perhaps the awareness of members of these problems and these reports, I was wondering, have these reports also been presented to social services? Something.
Councillor Don, can I suggest that you turn your camera off?
Right.
The sound's breaking up. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. I'll start again. As already been mentioned, we seem to have some perhaps lack of awareness of members of some of these problems. And I was wondering if these reports were going to be brought to both social services and maybe a joint finance and social services scrutiny committees to make them more aware of actually what the situation is. Particularly as I can't imagine that they treat unfortunately the Audit and Governance Committee as the most essential viewing. So, is this going elsewhere within the committee structure? Because I certainly think it should do.
Okay, diolch y cynghorydd Don. Fedrwn ni...
William, are you answering about this specifically?
Yeah, it's a very simple answer, and fair play to Conway for this. You have been taking this issue seriously, and these 3 reports were presented to a joint scrutiny committee a couple of weeks ago. So, fair play to you for doing that. You spent over an hour talking about it at this joint scrutiny committee meeting just a couple of weeks. I can't remember the date, but it's only been in the last couple of weeks. So that's really good that you've taken it seriously and taken it to scrutiny already.
Thanks for that confirmation.
Diolch yn fawr. Diolch. Os yw rhywun arall wan cyn i ni...
Cheryl Carlisle has a hand raised.
Dyna ni. Diolch yn fawr. Cynghorydd Siarad. Diolch.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair, for letting me speak, as I'm not on this committee. But as one of the Cabinet members for social care, I just want to let you know that we are taking this extremely seriously. And as Gwilym and Jeremy very ably pointed out, the problems begin with the Welsh Government structures themselves and the need for policy reform. This just handing over money in this sort of transactional way just doesn't work, but it needs the reform needs to come from the Welsh Government. Of course, we've got the white paper. I'm currently in a lot of meetings about the rebalancing of care with Welsh Government ministers. We should never, ever lose sight of the fact that it's the patient in the middle of all this, and that journey should be completely seamless for the patient and for their family at this most distressing time, and yes, usually the last step on their care journey. And of course, Conway has been dealing with this issue against the backdrop of the pandemic. I'd also like to, so obviously, as you can imagine, how stretched we are resource wise, with all the extra funding that's been needed during the pandemic for so many different things. I'd also like to let you know we've moved on in terms of the continuing healthcare funding. Conway an awful lot more proactive in getting the monies due from Betsy, and the partnership approach is what's needed, because when you go into a confrontational system as it was previously, it doesn't do anybody any good at all. So we're moving this on as best we can. So thank you for letting me speak, and just reassuring you all that this has been taken very seriously by the heads of service and the Cabinet members. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Cynghorydd Andrew, diolch.
Just a question for Cheryl then. Cheryl, has there now been established a formal agreement between the Council and the Health Board covering the reimbursement of our Health Board's contribution to the Council? And this is for, obviously, joint NHS and Council-funded nursing home care. So the report, taking it back to August 2020, shows there is no agreement, and it'd be interesting to know that there is agreement, because, again, it's getting towards £250,000.
but each case is on its own merits, isn't it? As you can imagine, each case is individual. But of course, the RPB has its hands in there now. But I will check on that for you, Andrew, and come back to you outside of here.
For the committee, it's part of the actual invoicing thing and so on and so forth. That there should be a formal agreement between the council and the health board on monies going in different directions. So if you can, I'll add that to the proposal. That'd be fantastic. Thanks, Cheryl. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cheryl. And perhaps if you could report back to this committee, we'd be grateful.
Yeah, very good.
Yep. Diolch. Thank you. One time, os oes neb arall.
Has anybody else has any questions to ask? We have a proposer. Goes back to next meeting agenda. And doesn't look into this and bring the report back if I've understood correctly. He's correctly correcting this, and Sam has seconded this. Are you all happy that that's what's happening with this item agenda, and that it comes back to the next meeting? Can you have a show of hands if you're all agree with us?
No, bydd o'n mynd sydd yn cynnig. Dyna ni, ardderchog. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Great, thank you very much. So now we're moving forward to the last item agenda, which is number 8.
Regulatory and housing services on the following matter. Dwi ddim yn gweld y sgrin. Mae well. Llai ddarllen yn gallach wan. A dwi'n cymryd yn fan hyn.
So this is on pages 278 to 304. And I think I'm correct in saying that Peter Brown has taken this report.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to keep my camera off if that's okay. I'm having some connection problems as well this morning. Yeah, this is hopefully pretty straightforward. It's just to provide a review and some statistics around the compliments and complaints received by the council for the 6-month period, April to September 2021. And it's a report simply for information and noting. So I'm not going to go through it in any great detail. It's pretty self-explanatory. In paragraph 3, there's some information around the compliments with the 3-year comparison for the same time period with some examples. Similarly, in paragraph 4, again, 3-year comparison and some examples for members to get some idea of what's being complained about. 5, there's a couple of examples of lessons learned. We do ask services for any lessons learned around complaints, and there's a couple in there for information. And then paragraph 6 is some information from the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales. There is an additional appendix attached to the report, which has some more detailed information in. And Jan Manley, who's the Corporate Complaints Officer, who's put all this together, is also, I hope, present at the meeting if anybody has any specific questions around the stats. So that's all I have to say at this point, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Peter. O ran...
So, in terms of the lessons learned, how will are these shared then afterwards?
Peter,
Peter, can you hear me?
Sorry, you dropped out there. Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yes, of course. Lessons learned. In
terms of the lessons learned, how far are those shared? Can you all hear me?
I'll turn my camera off.
Yeah, I think so. You asked how widely those lessons are shared, I think you said.
That's right, yes.
Well, the lessons, the specific examples that are in the report are quite specific, really, to the two services which are mentioned. I mean, this report is circulated. As I say, we do go out each time to the services to ask for their lessons, and these are the only two services that have come back this time. If there is anything which would be useful to any of the other services or corporately, then obviously that would be circulated via the compliance officers that Jan has contact with in the services. But as I say, those two are quite bespoke to those two services. But we would certainly share them via the service compliance officers.
Diolch yn fawr, Peter. Oes 'na
Very much, Peter. Anyone have any questions or comments about this report?
Councillor Chris Cater has his hand raised.
Thank you, Councillor Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This report really illustrates how strange the pandemic times have been, hasn't it? Because we've sort of had loads of compliments about the community support service and that side of things. And then, of course, that dropped out as lockdown was lifted and everything. And then we've had all these this increase in complaints to do with Venue Cymru when it reopened, not any fault of ours, but because people were concerned about attendees not wearing masks and so on. So that shot up. So really, I mean, it's not unexpected. People are stressed in this time, and you know, there's a section there on public protection, how they've had to deal with a lot more complaints about noise. You know, people have been at home more often and working at home, and complaining about barking dogs around them and that sort of thing. So it's a little bit difficult to analyse it, and I think Jan's done a very good job. But yeah, we're still in special, very strange times, aren't we? And you never know when the next lot of controversy is going to hit us, not due to our fault, but by Welsh Government regulations or whatever cascading down onto our services. So I just sort of wanted to make that point, Chair Tristan.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Diolch. Dwi'n gwybod ydych chi'n sylwi yn yr...
Not sure if you noticed in the chat that Fran has also
overall self-assessment process too, which is new this year as part of the LG&E Act. Wrach bod rhain chi wedi gweld hwn hefyd. Diolch.
Anyone else have any comments, any questions?
Na,
felly
gai ofyn am rhywun i
gynnig bod ni'n derbyn proposer and the second.
Yes, Chair, I'd like to propose that we note the contents of this report. Thank you.
Can I ask if anybody seconded this? Well, thank you. Can we have a show of hands? Thank you very much. So that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for your. We'll see you. We'll go next time. Thank you.